Have you ever felt like your house wasn't entirely empty, even when you were alone? Like something unseen was breathing just beyond the walls, watching, waiting. Tonight, we dive into a chilling nightmare that began with faint whispers and ended with a reality too horrifying to escape. This is the story of how I discovered something was living inside my walls and why it's getting louder. The house was supposed to be a fresh beginning. A quaint two-story home at the edge of town, old enough to have character, but sturdy enough to promise peace. I moved in alone, boxes stacked like towers around me, my future brimming with hope. As the sun dipped behind skeletal trees, shadows stretched long and thin across the faded hardwood floors. The house creaked and groaned with the night, but I told myself it was just settling. The first night passed quietly, until the scratching began. It was faint at first, like the tip of a fingernail grazing the inside of the wall near my bed. I sat up, heart thrumming. Maybe a rat? I rationalized. Houses like this probably had pests. Still, the scratching wasn't sporadic. It was deliberate, slow, measured, like something was thinking. The next morning, I called an exterminator. While waiting for the appointment, I noticed something stranger. The air near the living room wall was frigid. Even though the thermostat insisted it was a warm 72 degrees. I pressed my hand against the plaster. It was so cold it burned, and when I leaned closer, I thought I heard breathing. Soft, shuddering, wet. Later that evening, while unpacking the kitchen, I heard whispering through the old vent by the floor. Words I couldn't make out, but unmistakably voices. My stomach twisted. I yanked the vent cover off, expecting to see mice or rats. But the tunnel was clean, no droppings, no nests. Only a deep black emptiness that seemed to go on forever. That night, I barely slept. Every hour, the sounds grew louder. Scraping, muffled thuds, the creak of being pushed from inside. At around 3 a.m., I jolted awake to what sounded like faint knocking from behind my headboard. I pressed my ear to the wall, and this time, there was no mistaking it. A voice, raspy and cracked, whispered directly into my ear. Determined to prove to myself it was all in my head, I knocked on the wall. 3 sharp taps. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then from inside, something knocked back, 3 deliberate, heavy thuds. I stumbled away from the wall, my pulse hammering in my ears. The sound of something dragging itself through the walls followed me as I fled down the stairs. The next morning, the exterminator finally arrived. A wiry, older man named Bill, with leathery skin and deep frown lines, looked around with skeptical eye. I showed him the vents, the walls, the cold spot near the living room. Bill tapped the wall with a gloved knuckle and paused. "Sounds hollow," he said, "but something's not right about the echo." He drilled a small hole into the wall and snaked a camera inside. I hovered over his shoulder as he adjusted the monitor, expecting rats, nests, or even mold. Instead, the screen showed nothing but an empty, black void. No studs, no insulation, no pipes. Just space. Bill pulled the camera out and shook his head. "This ain't right. This ain't normal construction." He left before sunset, muttering about old houses and bad luck. Later that evening, after Bill had gone, I noticed something near the hole he drilled. It had widened slowly, as if the plaster itself had been crumbling outward. From inside the growing hole, a sour, metallic smell drifted into the room. I leaned closer, flashlight trembling in my hand. Deep inside, 2 tiny reflective dots hovered like eyes. When I blinked, they were gone. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay rigid under the covers, listening as the scratching sounds grew bolder, faster. But this time, they weren't just in the walls. They were overhead, crawling along the ceiling like a centipede with too many legs. I saw a ripple pass through plaster above me, the surface bulging down slightly, sagging under invisible weight. And then, a sharp screeching noise, like nails dragging furiously across the ceiling, made me bolt upright. Desperate, I started exploring parts of the house I'd ignored during the move. In the basement, I found a door I hadn't noticed before, tucked behind a rusted water heater, almost hidden by old piping. The door was small, maybe 4 feet tall, and it had 5 heavy locks bolting it shut from the outside. There were scratch marks gouged into the wood, long, desperate claw marks. Above the frame, faintly written in faded red paint, were the words, "Do not open." As I stood staring at the locked door, the basement seemed to darken unnaturally. The overhead bulb flickered and the temperature plummeted. From behind the tiny door, I heard whispers. Not one voice, but many, hissing and murmuring in unison. I pressed my ear against the door despite every instinct screaming not to. A chorus of broken voices whispered the same phrase over and over. "It's hungry." I stumbled backward, tripping over a pile of rotted wood. The whispers grew louder, an urgent, needy chant that rattled the pipes and shook dust from the ceiling. I fled back upstairs, slamming the basement door behind me. But as I pressed my weight against it, I heard it, a loud, wet tearing sound. I turned to see the living room wall behind me, splitting open, not in a clean crack, but as if something with jagged claws was ripping the plaster apart from the inside out. The scent of rot and iron flooded the room. I could see something now. Pale, elongated fingers clawing through the breach, blindly searching. They scraped along the floorboards, leaving deep gouges as they grasped toward me. And then, from deep inside the hole, a voice. Not a whisper this time, but a guttural, broken growl. "Let me see you." I ran upstairs, thinking I could escape whatever was slithering through my broken walls. But the hallway didn't look right anymore. It seemed longer, impossibly long. The floorboards under my feet bent and groaned, and the walls twisted inward, narrowing, suffocating. Family photos that once hung neatly on the walls were now distorted. Faces melted into grotesque smears of anguish. Every step I took down the hallway was like moving through a tunnel that pulsed and breathed. Behind me, from the ruined living room, something heavy shuffled forward. At the end of the endless hallway, there was a tall, old mirror I had never seen before. Its surface was tarnished black, reflecting almost nothing. As I staggered closer, the mirror rippled like water. Instead of my own reflection, I saw a version of myself. Eyes hollow, mouth stitched shut, hands clawing the glass from the other side, silently begging me not to continue forward. Behind my twisted reflection, something tall and faceless loomed. I tore myself away from the mirror just as the walls themselves exploded outward. Pale, skeletal hands shot from the splintered wood and plaster, grabbing at my arms and legs. They pulled with unnatural strength, cold fingers clawing at my skin, leaving deep, burning scratches. Screaming, I fought free and stumbled backward into the bathroom, slamming the door shut behind me. The walls outside vibrated with furious, inhuman howls. The bathroom was untouched by the chaos. For now, it felt cleaner, untouched by whatever nightmare was unfolding in the rest of the house. I collapsed onto the tile floor, gasping. In the mirror above the sink, my reflection trembled, but I wasn't moving. I stood still, frozen with horror, as my reflection slowly raised a finger to its lips and whispered, "SHHH, it can hear you." The light bulb overhead popped, plunging me into darkness. From the darkness, new sounds rose, the gurgling and hissing of water rushing violently through ancient pipes. But the noises twisted into something else, voices. Hundreds of whispering voices echoed up from the sink, the drain in the floor, the toilet. Every pipe seemed to scream. They called my name, over and over again in broken, distorted versions of my own voice. It felt like the house itself was trying to pull me apart. I realized with chilling clarity that hiding wouldn't save me. If I wanted to survive, I had to confront whatever had been sealed behind that basement door. Steeling myself, I crept back through the broken house. The entities shrieked and howled from inside the walls, angry but hesitant. Something was keeping it from fully manifesting. As I reached the basement steps, I found a message, freshly scratched into the wooden floorboards by what looked like claw marks. 3 words. Don't unlock it. But I knew something worse was coming, something I couldn't outrun. And the locks, they were starting to rust and snap on their own. The house creaked and groaned around me as I stood at the basement door, heart hammering so hard it blurred my vision. Only one rusted lock remained, holding whatever was inside at bay. I reached out, hand trembling, when snap, The last lock broke on its own, falling to the floor with a dull clang. The door creaked open an inch. A rush of icy air poured out, carried with the smell of damp earth and something foul, rotting and sweet. Something was waiting for me in the darkness below. I stepped onto the basement stairs, flashlight trembling in my grip. The light barely cut through the blackness. It seemed almost alive, swallowing the beam. The stairs groaned under my weight, and each step downward felt heavier, as if something unseen was trying to drag me back up, away from whatever horror waited below. Halfway down, the walls around the stairwell began to breathe, contracting and expanding with wet, sucking sounds. I realized the house itself was alive now. At the bottom of the stairs, I found a vast underground room that shouldn't have existed. The ceiling stretched far above, vanishing into darkness, and thick roots dangled like grasping fingers. The ground was soft and wet underfoot. In the center of the room was a circle of broken stones, etched with symbols too old to understand. Inside the circle was a pit, deep and narrow, from which the sounds of whispering rose like steam. I wasn't alone. I edged closer to the pit, unable to resist its pull. Inside, something stirred. First a shape, pale and slick like something birthed from nightmares. Then eyes, too many to count, opening one by one along its writhing form. It stared up at me, not with hatred, but with hunger. It whispered in 100 broken voices. "We have been waiting." The pit quivered, and long, skeletal limbs began reaching out, pulling against the crumbling stones. As the thing rose, the basement walls rippled and revealed memories, flashes of the house's history. A family huddled together, faces gaunt with fear, blood pooling beneath the walls. Someone, maybe a previous owner, nailing the basement door shut, sobbing uncontrollably. The house wasn't built on something evil. The house itself had been grown, cultivated around this creature like flesh around a tumor. It wasn't a home, it was a prison. And now the prison was breaking. The stone circle cracked with a thunderous snap. The thing pulled itself halfway out of the pit, its form an ever-shifting mass of teeth, claws, and eyes. Its whispering grew deafening, bleeding into my mind, filling my vision with impossible images. Endless corridors of flesh, oceans of black, suns devoured by monstrous mouths. I turned to flee, but the basement stairway had vanished, replaced by a writhing wall of pulsing, living tissue. There was no way back, only deeper. The cavern shook violently as the creature dragged more of itself free from the pit. The house above groaned and cracked, the walls splitting like skin torn by too much pressure. Through the cracks, a horrifying sight. The world outside wasn't normal anymore. The sky was black and swirling, filled with moving shapes too massive to comprehend. The trees were writhing like serpents. The streets twisted, folding in on themselves like paper. The thing inside the pit wasn't just breaking free from the house. It was breaking free from reality itself. The ground beneath me heaved, and with a sickening lurch, the entire house seemed to swallow itself. I was dragged through shifting walls of living, breathing tissue, deeper into the belly of the beast. Tunnels opened up all around me. Some led to impossible places. A school hallway full of eyeless children, a hospital room filled with broken, twitching patients, a vast desert where screaming figures roamed beneath burning black suns. I realized with horror, every nightmare I ever imagined had been growing inside the house, feeding the creature, and now it was birthing them into the world. At the center of the house's true form was a colossal, throbbing heart made of walls, stairways, and splintered beams, fused with bone and muscle. The heart pulsed with each thunderous beat, sending tremors through the shifting organic labyrinth. And above it floated the creature from the pit, no longer shackled. It had grown wings made of torn cloth and broken wood, eyes like dying stars, and a voice like a million screams echoing from the end of time. It turned its gaze toward me, and it recognized me. The creature spoke, not in words, but directly into my mind. "You are the first to see, the first to understand. Become the herald, become the mouth." I saw what it meant. If I accepted, I would be spared, transformed into something else, something inhuman, but alive. If I refused, I would be consumed, lost in the writhing madness forever. For one fragile moment, I stood at the edge of choice. I didn't know where the strength came from. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was simple, blind human defiance. I spat into the darkness. No. The beast's form shuddered violently. The walls of flesh and bone around us screamed, rupturing in a storm of blood and dust. It unleashed a howl so deep and ancient that the very ground beneath me cracked open, revealing a drop into infinite blackness. I fell, tumbling through nightmare after nightmare, clawed by invisible hands, suffocated by endless echoes. I jolted awake in my bed. Sunlight streamed through the window. The house was intact, silent, normal. For a terrible moment, I thought it had all been a dream, until I looked at the walls. Fine, hairline cracks ran through the paint, like veins just beneath the skin. And if I pressed my ear against the wall, I could still hear it. The faint scratching, the distant breathing, the whispering, still louder than before. It wasn't gone. It was waiting, and it was still inside. The walls are silent now, but I know it's not over. It's just waiting, breathing in the dark, deeper than the cracks, older than the house itself. One day, someone else will hear it, and when they do, they won't be alone anymore.